This is a presentation for the Winnipeg Philatelic Society, Western Canada's oldest stamp club, on postage due stamps, and particularly the stamps of France and Canada. Now I have the word stamps in quotes because postage due stamps aren't quite technically stamps. You couldn't mail a letter with one if, when they were still being used, you had put one on a letter and mailed it. When the post office delivered it, they would have asked you for money. Now, the first adhesive postage stamp was issued by Great Britain in 1840. France took a little bit longer. They'd been having some revolutions which ended in about 1848, and so their first stamp was issued in 1849. The first Canadian stamp was in 1851. Though again, I've got that in quotes because Canada as a country didn't exist until 1867. And before that, there was Newfoundland and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Vancouver Island, and British Columbia. And they, as well as Canada, which was Upper Canada and Lower Canada, which became Ontario and Quebec, they all issued stamps up until 1867. France, however, has the honor of issuing the first postage due stamp, which they did in 1859. For instance, the United Kingdom issued postage due stamps from 1914 until it stopped using them in the year 2000. Canada issued them from 1906 until it stopped using them in 1982. Now, most countries' postage due stamps were very simple. They were just a number in an engraved circle, something like that. French postage stamps may have been among the nicest. That's one of the reasons I've included them in this presentation. The other thing is I had understood that the phrase apercevoir means postage due, but I noticed that's not exclusively used on French stamps, so I wanted to understand a more literal translation of postage due and then compare it to Canadian stamps. So France issued, shall we say, 9 series of postage due stamps. The first one, 1859 to 1878, and it was basically just a large number in the middle of a stamp, and it was imperforate. The colors were mostly black, but there were also blue and yellow. And there were 2 phrases, chiffre taxe and apercevoir. And chiffre taxe, chiffre means amount, so it's a tax amount or amount charged, and apercevoir means to be collected. So it's an amount to be collected in sort of a literal translation. Second series, 1882 to 1892, these were a bit fancier. They were a number in a scroll. They were perforated. All of them were black, and the same phrases were used. You have to be careful between series 2 and 3 because I see people sometimes misclassifying them between the two. Series 2 is all black. Series 3 is all in colors and none were black. It's exactly the same design, but the differentiation is the color or not. So let's look at these stamps. There is one of the stamps of the first series. There were 9 values. They were mostly black. This is the mostly black one, but I said also blue and yellow. Does not have the country name, and that was common with the first ones because why would you need to do it? They were only going to be used within your own country. This also has a long and a short E variety, which I will say I'm not quite expert enough to understand, but that's a complexity in the first issue. The second series, here we have 5 centimes apercevoir in a scroll kind of in the middle, chiffre taxe at the top, posts at each side, and RF or République Française in the corners. And there were 15 values, and I said all in black. So you've got to be careful because the values were repeated in color in the next series. So you have to be careful to know which series you're in. Series 2, this was 15 values and all in color. Here's the 25 centimes à percevoir, same format as before. Now the next series, which I call Series 4 and 5 and 4A and 5A, 4A and 5A because they were overprinted, issued between 1908 and 1931. The design is a circle with a number in the middle of the circle. And the differentiation between the two types is the first one has a lot of words and the second has fewer words. And you kind of would think that they'd be really easy to differentiate, but when they're canceled and when it's the size of a stamp, it's kind of hard to see. You have to pay attention. When you look at the ones I'm showing, you're going to go, well, that's really easy to see. In real life, it's a little harder. And the phraseology differs. The term on Series 4 is recouvrement valeur impayée, recovery of unpaid amount. And you're kind of wondering, well, why is that? Well, what it was these stamps were used for undelivered or refused mail that was returned to the sender. So it was the sender that was paying the postage due, not the receiver. And it refers to the Financial Law of 1892, Article 29, which I assume is where this requirement came from. And Series 4A, 1917 and 1926, same design, overprinted, and the same words printed, with the reference to the Financial Law of 1892. The Series 5 and 5A, very similar. It's still a number in a circle, but this time with fewer words, all in color. All these four series were in color. And now it goes back to recouvrement, taxe à percevoir, recovery amount to be collected, kind of literally. So when we look at them, we'll say, well, those are really obviously different. So here's the Series 4. As I say, lots of words, particularly down at the bottom there. You see there's lots of words. And you go, okay. And there's this, the overprinted stamp, same stamp, overprinted. It goes from 30 centimes down to 20. And here's Series 5, and it's real similar. Everything other than what's in the circle is the same, and outside this, inside the circle, just fewer words. And refers to the Republic of France and Poste Telegraph, RF and PT. So very similar to the previous, but the words are different. So you have to pay attention. And here is that stamp overprinted. There were two styles of overprint, and this is one of them. Then Series 6 to 9. The first two are sheaves of wheat. And you have to be particularly careful with these because the only difference is one says chiffre tax and the other says timbre tax. Charge amount and stamp charge, kind of literally. It all means postage due. All were in color. Series 8 and 9, flowers and bugs, were in multicolor. And timbre tax and timbre hyphen tax. So just another way of saying it. So in all, we have 6 different ways to say postage due on French stamps. And here is the sheaves of wheat design, chiffre tax down at the bottom. And again, when the stamp is this big, it's really easy to see. It's not so easy when you're glancing at something that's the size of a stamp. And there were 11 values, and as we can see, the next series has exactly the same design, but now it says timbre tax down at the bottom. And there were 17 values of this. Apparently, partway through, the French currency was devalued, and so the value of the same stamps, but with a divided by 10 value. Once we get to the flowers and the bugs, these are, I guess France decided at this time that they were going to make their postage due stamps as pretty as their other stamps. So there are 8 different values with 8 different flowers on them and timbre tax. And then the bugs, timbre hyphen tax, 10 values, 10 different bugs, all in a variety of colors. So they're really quite attractive stamps. Canada has 8 series of stamps. And The first series of 4, suppose not that difficult to separate. There's a filigree sort of at the side of the number. And on the first series, it's out at the top and in at the bottom. And on the second series, it flips around and it's in at the top and out at the bottom. All 4 are blue. And the first 2 series are only in English. And there are some people who would have said that Canada became a bilingual country in 1775 with the Quebec Act, or perhaps in 1867 with the Confederation Act. Certainly became bilingual in 1969 with the Official Languages Act. Canada Post, however, in 1933 decided that stamps should be in both French and English. Postage due anyway. Other stamps were a little earlier than that. And so the French is apercevoir, postage due. And the first 3 series are similar. The 4th series also similar, but it turns to portrait format. So let's look at those. There's the first series, and you can see the filigree at the side. The frond kind of curves out at the top and curves in at the bottom. The next series is exactly the same, almost, except in at the top and out at the bottom. Series 3, again similar, a much smaller kind of filigree at the side, but now postage due at the top and a percevoir at the bottom, and it's now a bilingual postage due stamp. Series 4, again similar, same words, similar filigree, but it's now portrait orientation. So those are 4 2-cent stamps, 2-cent postage due stamps. Starting in 1969 and running through to 1978, we have 4 series of red postage due stamps. They're a little prettier. Still bilingual, apercevoir and postage due. These are lots of fun to distinguish, and me being the kind of collector that really just wants the obviously different stamp, to some extent I don't care, but if you want, you can pay some attention and find out the differences in all of these. The first 3 series are all perf 12, the last one 12.5 by 12. The first 2 series have dexedrine gum, the last 2 have PVA gum. The first series is slightly larger. The next 3 series are all the same size. And the only difference between 6 and 7 is the gum. So if you have a used stamp, you can't tell the difference. Unless there are some stamps that were only issued in Series 6 or Series 7, so you can identify those if they're used, but otherwise you can't. And finally, the last one with the PVA gum. Again, some can be distinguished because they were only issued in that series. So I'll show you what they look like. They all kind of look the same. It's actually Series 2. If it were Series 1, it would be slightly larger, but you really can't see that when I blow it up like this in the presentations. But they would look exactly like that. They were the same. Series 3, again, exactly the same. The only difference is the gum. And I know this is Series 3 because the 16-cent postage due was only issued in Series 3. And the 8th series calls the 4th issue. Only this one was the only one that had a 50-cent postage due stamp, so I know it's the 4th issue without looking at the gum or the perfs or anything like that. Too complicated for me. So, in summary, France has 6 ways of saying postage due, one of which being return to sender, and I found that very interesting. I didn't know that before I started this presentation. Canada, like many, just has a number, and they're not that attractive stamps. France has more design in their postage due stamps than many countries. And in both countries, you have to have care in differentiating the stamps because some can be very similar and hard to differentiate. So, thanks for listening.